But there are few people who can do justice to the story as well, or place it within the larger American story more eloquently than our guest tonight, Anne Curry. Wherever Anne Curry in her life has gone, and whatever journalistic form she's mastered, she's continued to demonstrate a profound empathy with the people whose stories she's recounted. And that's also so much of the spirit of what JANM is about, that profound empathy that we have for that history, for the people, for the sites, the preservation of the artifacts and the history. And Anne has this amazing ability to provide insight and perspective on history and to discover the emotional heart of the human stories so uniquely, so powerfully. And it's because of that that she's able to speak tonight more eloquently than anybody else probably of our theme, which is a vision, commitment, and renewal. But before I invite her on stage, let me share a bit of admiration for my fellow Anne, or should I say my sister Anne. She's an internationally acclaimed journalist, and for the last 40 years, she has done extraordinary things. We've watched her career, 15 years of which she was the co-anchor of the Today Show. We've all seen her live medical series, Chasing the Cure, which will premiere soon. And then in her PBS series, We'll Meet Again, has provided us with many poignant and life-affirming moments. And before I call her to the stage, join me in watching a brief clip about Anne that tells you about that heart and that passion and that empathy.
Mary Frances came up to me and said, "My mama told me to tell you that we're at war with Japan and you're Japanese, so I can't play with you anymore."
But then Mary Frances showed her a kindness she has never forgotten.
She came up to me and said, "Oh, Reiko, you've got to see what wonderful things I got."
At Christmas, what she got for Christmas?
Yeah, she got the Christmas presents she wanted to share with me. And I said, "Yeah, but your mother said you couldn't play with me." And she said, "She won't know."
Even now at 83, Reiko wonders where Mary Frances found the courage to disobey her parents.
She was a very strong friend, very strong person to do what she did for me, to show her friendship at a time when it was not good to be Japanese.
And now the highlight of our evening. So without further ado, please let's welcome Anne Curry.
Konbanwa. Good evening. Arigatou gozaimasu ne. Thank you for your warm welcome. No pressure being the highlight of your evening. But thank you, Anne, and also Irene Hirano for conspiring to invite me back to this museum for this celebration. It is a true joy. It has been all evening. It is a joy now for me to be among you. And holy cow, we are in the presence of the great Norman Mineta. You know, if my Japanese-American mother, Hiroe Nagase, is able to watch from above tonight, she is bursting with pride, and she's also telling me to fix my hair. And likely that I'm wearing too much eyeliner, and I'm wearing the wrong dress, but that she loves me. Anne Burroughs' invitation noted that because of my recent stories on PBS, and also in National Geographic magazine, about the incarceration of Japanese Americans during World War II, that perhaps I might, in this moment when anger towards immigrants in America is again rising, offer some perspective that might be useful tonight. This kind of anger does need perspective, as we see it swelling into hate, not just in America, but also elsewhere in the world, moving like a virus, infecting politics and policies, destroying trust and relationships, and threatening wider intolerance and even physical violence against people because of their religion or their race. People are asking, what in God's name is going on? Or as God likely has nothing to do with it, what the hell is happening? And forgive the four-letter word, my mother would have put it much more politely. She would have said, "Komata ne?" It's a problem, isn't it? Though I doubt that I can actually offer enough perspective to fully explain what's happening, I can offer what my nearly 40 years of journalism has taught me, including reporting from the farthest reaches of inhumanity. I can bring my experiences growing up multiracial in a post-war America before interracial marriage was fully legalized. And I can factor in what I've learned as a student of history and of the present and consider what all of this might tell us about how we got back to a time when people are so vulnerable to being targeted as others. And what I see is a pattern with strikingly similar characteristics from place to place and from the past to the present. The pattern begins with fear that is sparked and stoked by people in power, capitalizing on untended discontent. Discontent can pile up in layers like dry tinder over time and grow so thick that when it's lit, it can suddenly explode into flames and move at a speed that can surprise even the one who struck the match. Lies work like gasoline on these flames, and they can send the fire roaring out of control, as we have seen in our own time, in Rwanda and Bosnia and Kosovo, Darfur, in Syria, and now in the Central African Republic. This is what happened in Germany, leading to World War II. People in power capitalizing on discontent, sparking a fire of fear and fury stoked with lies. We have heard this story before, and this community, among others, knows too well the deep suffering this pattern can bring. I first learned about the incarceration of people of Japanese ancestry not in school, but from a book of photographs I happened upon in a public library. And I struggled to make sense of how this could happen in the America that I was growing up in. I'd already knew about fear and prejudice, having experienced from a very young age the pain of being diminished, of being called racial epithets. And I had watched my mother, who had immigrated right after the war, endure and overcome for years and still believe in the promise of this great nation. But I didn't really understand how it could happen until I realized that after Japan's devastating attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941, there was not just fear and prejudice in this country, but there were people in power who chose to exacerbate both. The U.S. Navy Secretary Frank Knox, in his first public remarks after the attack, held a news conference in this city to publicly accuse Japanese Americans of aiding in the attack, giving baseless rumors sudden credibility. To that he added, quote, "Each of our little Japanese friends will know his part, and in the event of any possible attempted invasion or air raid." No one, not even the media, questioned his evidence. The media actually amplified the fears. And so did the then mayor of Los Angeles, Fletcher Bowen, saying, "We cannot run the risk of another Pearl Harbor episode in Southern California." Then, 9 weeks after the attack, the Army General John DeWitt recommended that people of Japanese ancestry be excluded from the West Coast as a military necessity, writing, "In the war in which we are now engaged, racial affinities are not severed by migration. The Japanese race is an enemy race, and while many second and third generation Japanese born on United States soil, possessed of United States citizenship, have become Americanized, the racial strains are undiluted." By the time the Justice Department sought to oppose the incarceration, the fury was out of control. So it too went along, as did the President, Franklin Roosevelt. This is how it happened. Why, 120,000 people, 2/3 of them United States citizens, were forced behind barbed wires. I was stunned to discover that more than 5,000 babies were born incarcerated, and close to 2,000 people died incarcerated. And we now know that government lawyers suppressed a Navy intelligence report that had found at that time that Japanese Americans posed no military threat and showed no evidence of being disloyal. And as it turned out, no evidence was ever found of disloyalty or wrongdoings by any Americans of Japanese ancestry during World War II. And yet, still today, the lie persists. Even as I was writing about the Japanese incarceration for National Geographic magazine, someone I know really well, who was both highly educated and also a California native, asked me, but didn't Japanese Americans in Hawaii aid in the bombing of Pearl Harbor? We cannot prevent people in power from telling lies, but we can call out a lie. We can address the fear. We can understand with compassion the causes of discontent. And we can and we should tell the truth in every way possible, including in museums like the one that gathers us here tonight, about what was once allowed to happen, and to tell the story not just to ourselves, but to people who might not otherwise know it. And as we all know in this room, there are so many stories to tell. The story of the great Norman Mineta, the boy forced to spend years in Heart Mountain by a country he would someday help lead as a mayor, a U.S. representative, and a member of cabinet under 2 presidents, and as we just heard, co-sponsoring along the way the legislation that granted reparations to Japanese Americans. And we have the story of Torazo Sakaye, who died at age 67 in Manzanar Camp. This photo of Torazo was taken there by Dorothea Lange. His grandson, Walter, seen here on his shoulders, now thinks that Torazo died, quote, more or less of a broken heart. Also deeply moving is the story of Shozu Ohara, a member of the Japanese Chamber of Commerce in Little Tokyo before the war. He never fully recovered after it ended, as he struggled with feelings of shame for having been seen as disloyal. His son, Junzo Jake Ohara, says, quote, he had a breakdown and would walk the long way around so he didn't have to see anyone he knew. Shozu Ohara did nothing wrong. And I wonder if we could ask his son, Junzo Jake Ohara, to stand tonight as he is in our audience so that we might acknowledge Shozu Ohara and his family as they deserve. He's over there, as you can see, standing in that corner. And you can see Junzo Jake Ohara in the far left of this photograph, I think that's about to come up. It was taken at Heart Mountain Relocation Center in 1943. He was then the Boy Scout on the far left, holding his bugle. And then here he is on the left of this photo, taken by photographer Paul Kitakaki, who posed these boys again 70 years later, but also many people who were photographed then for a display that is now on display in the museum, and also for a new book that he's put together. And remarkably, Paul discovered photos of his own family that had been in the National Archives, because his family too had been incarcerated, among many photographs that were impounded by the US government until after the war. Sometimes when I think about the people in these photographs and their suffering, it helps to try to internalize just a little bit of the courage of the men in the 100th and the 442nd, who fought and died for America and its promise, becoming against all odds the most decorated combat unit for its size in U.S. history. Their stunning example, in the example of their families, helps me stand a little straighter and speak a little louder. All of us, I think, adding our voices to the voices of people, all people who've been looked down upon and diminished as others. They did not give up, and neither will we. My life's work has convinced me that truth is a shield. It can defend people, and when truth rises, so do the rest of us. We can see this in the wider story of humanity, worth keeping in mind now as America struggles with its own ideals. Since our origins, and despite our darkest impulses, humans have climbed, not everywhere, not all at once, but slowly, 2 steps up and 1 step down, 3 steps up, and then a terrible fall, before we stand back up and climb again. Our collective path could be charted on a graph, rising as we move through time, up and up and up, painfully but persistently towards knowledge, understanding, and empathy that is awakening in us what we may deep down already know. There are no others. There is just us. And as we are human, there is now, even in this time, ample reason to hope. Thank you.